Welcome. Today we're going to talk about how to make a simple website using replit.com. The URL is spelled as such, https://replit.com. It is a free website that allows you to edit your code online and also have the website be available for everyone else to see. First step is to make an account. You can use an email and password, or you can use Google, GitHub, and anything you want. In our case, I'm going to go with GitHub since that's the account I have. Once you log in, you will be on the home page. Here, you're able to create a repo, which is, think of it as a workspace. In our case, we'll make a HTML, CSS, and JavaScript repo. In order to do that, first click on Create. Go down to the list to find HTML, CSS, or JS, or you can type search here. Select HTML, CSS, JS. Give it any title you want. I'll call it my test website. And you can click create. And then once you do that, you have your workspace. Now, in the future, if you want to return to your workspace and continue editing, you will be able to see it in your recent history right here. For example, it's right here, my test website. If you're on your profile, you can also go to profile and see a list of all of the repository you have ever made. Once you're in the repository, there's three parts. First, there's the file view on the left side. You have all of your files here. This is where you can create new files or upload files of your own. Second is the edit view. Once you click on a file, you're able to edit its content in the edit view. You can also have multiple tabs open at the same time to look at them when you click on them and look at them. Lastly, we have the web view. This is what the website of ours would look like if we were to show it to other people. You can see right now it says Hello World because that's all our website have to offer. If I were to change this to Hello World Friends, you can show the result by clicking Run, and the web view will refresh and it will show what you have edited in the file view. There's also a shell view, but don't worry about that for now. However, the web view has some issues. For example, if you were to try to open another website, such as Google or YouTube within this web view, it typically wouldn't work. In that case, what you want to do is click on the green button right here, and down here it will say a dev URL. This is a temporary URL that lets you view your website as if you're seeing it as a full page, and it will work exactly as a website does. And this URL will go away once you close this repository, so be careful. Now, let's start talking about the basics of HTML. In an HTML file indicated by the extension .html, this is where the content of your website will live. As you can see, when we open a repository, there has been a lot of information that's already filled out for us. But all you really have to know is that first, for HTML documents, you need to have this at the very beginning, !doc_type HTML, to indicate that this is an HTML file. Now, the second thing about HTML is that almost everything comes in pairs. As in, think about mathematical brackets. You have an opening bracket and you have a closing bracket. In HTML, these are represented by tags. Here is an example of a tag. Let's look at line 13 specifically. When we look at line 13, we see that it has some strange markings. These sharp arrow brackets indicate a tag. And when you have a tag, it needs to start with a single word, and that is the tag. The entire thing, you can think of it as a block since it have a pair of starting tag and ending tag. Another example we have here is the body. We can see there's the starting body tag indicated by the sharp arrow and with body in the middle, and the closing tag looks almost identical except it has a slash before the tag itself. So now we can see we have the body tag, this is where it starts, this is where it ends, and everything in between is sort of included in the body because it's after the starting tag but before the ending tag. You're also able to describe tags with pairs of attributes. These are shown as part of the starting tag. After the tag word itself but before the sharp arrow, the arrow bracket, you can insert a space, and then you can insert a pair of values in this format, name equals something. You can see a lot of examples here. So for example, we have script, which is a way for us to import behavior into our website. We won't be getting into that right now, but just looking at this tag, at this element right here, we have a tag of script, and we have the closing tag of /script. And after the opening tag script, we insert a space, and we're saying src, which stands for source, equals script.js. What this means is that we're telling the browser, the website, hey, we have some behavior which is stored in a file called script.js, and it's going to be a script element. Okay, since we're not going to be using it, we can delete this line. If you want to learn more about JavaScript, feel free to look online for how to integrate JavaScript into your website. Okay, here's another example. We have a link that has a reference, which is the style, the CSS that we're going to be using. It's a style sheet, and it's a text/CSS file. So great, now we have the basics of how to write an HTML, but what exactly are the tags that we should be using? Great, now we have a basic HTML, but what are the tags we should be using? Let's go through some commonly used tags. First of all, we have this, which is not exactly a tag, but it needs to be there for on the first line of your HTML for it to be recognized as the website. Secondly, you need the HTML tag. It needs to basically include your entire website to say, hey, everything within the HTML is considered part of our website. Then we have the header. The header includes some miscellaneous information, such as where to find the CSS, which is how to change how your website looks, what the title of the website should be, and some data about the character and how big your website should view. So these are the ones you don't really have to modify, perhaps the title if you want to give it a custom name. But the most important one is the body. Everything that goes between the opening body tag and the closing body tag will show up on your website, or rather it's intended to be shown on your website. Let's start with some simple tags. One of the most commonly used tags is the H tag, in specifically from H1 all the way to H8. So these are tags that is meant to, these are tags for text. So you need to put text in between here. So for example, let's say instead of hello world, we have a title, my website. Now when you click run, you can see the text, my website, is very large, and it's also bold, and it has a lot of space around it. This is the property of the H1. It is intended to be the big, bold font that should only have one of those on your website, and it should tell everyone what your website is all about. And you can go down to the next tier, H2, and as you can see here, it's still bold, but it's a little bit smaller. So as you might be able to guess, as you go down this list, it will get smaller with each number, and it's sort of like a subsection or a subtitle. Okay, you can experiment with these however you want, but they're a useful tool to give your website a sense of layout. Next, we have the P element, which stands for paragraph. When you have a paragraph, you can put a lot of text here, and it will show up as just regular text. The one advantage of paragraph is that normally if you were to put two text on different lines like this, they actually end up on the same line. This is because HTML ignores any white space you have. White space meaning any space, any tab, or any line changes. It pretends it doesn't exist. So when you have text that you intend to exist on multiple lines, simply writing it on multiple lines in your source code would not do anything. It will kind of combine them into one line of text. However, if you surround your text with the P element, then it will take it as a paragraph and have it on its own separate line. This line can be very, very long, and if you have a lot of text, it'll wrap around automatically. But as soon as the text is over, it will always go to the next line. That is the P element. Alternatively, if you would like to have your text on a different line without using a P element, you can use what's known as a BR, which is a line break. When you have a BR element, nothing really goes between the starting tag and the ending tag. All it does is it inserts a line change here. So if I were to get rid of this, and I just have ipsum and some gibberish that I wrote, you can see even though they're not surrounded by the P element, but they have a BR between them, it works as if there's a line break between them because we have this BR in there. Next, let's start talking about images. Images is a great way to add some flair to a website, and they're used everywhere. In order to add an image, you need to use the image tag as img. And of course, just like any tag, it needs to be closed. Now, if we were to click run right now, nothing will happen because all we're saying is that we're going to add an image here, but we didn't exactly specify what kind of image it should be. There are two ways you can add images to a website, and both the ways work very similarly using the description or the attribute SRC stands for source. Once you have the source attribute, in between these double quotation marks, you can put in either a URL to the image, or you can upload an image here and put its file name here. Let's go with the first one first. Here I have a stock picture of a beautiful sunset. All you have to do is right click, copy image address, and you paste it here. Ideally, it should end in an image format such as .jpg, .jpeg, .png, .gif, etc. Now, once you click run, the image will show up on your website. Now you may ask, wow, this looks really big. How do I make it smaller? You can add another attribute to your image tag by adding more space and say width of the image. You can set the custom width of your image to any number of pixels. So if I want it to be 200 pixels, I will do 200 px. Now, once I have the width equals 200, I can click run, and the image is now much smaller. Now, let's try uploading a file here. Up here, you will see a bunch of options such as new file, new folder, or the three dots. Click on three dots and click upload file. In here, you can choose any picture you have taken, double click it, and it will be uploaded to the website. Now, be careful because this is a public website unless you go premium, so do not include any personal information or photos you might not want others to see on the website unless you intend it for the public to see them. Let's give this a customizable name so it's easier for us to know what it is. In this case, we'll say it's a sunset. Now, instead of using this very long URL, we'll use the file name, which in our case is sunset.jpg. Make sure it's spelled exactly the same as the file itself. Now, if I click run, you'll see the picture changing to the sunset. Lastly, let's talk about what happens if we have multiple pages on a website. Very frequently, a website is consisted of multiple pages. We can do that here as well. You will notice that the first file we have is index.html. This is sort of the default page that everyone will see when they come to a website. If you want to add another file, or rather another page, you can click new file and you can give it a name. Let's call it music, and you give it the same attribute .html. This will open up a completely empty document, but in a way, this is now your second page on your HTML. We'll do the exact same thing as here. So we'll copy over the header, we'll add the HTML tag, we'll add the body tag, and then we'll say this is my music page, exclamation mark. So once you have this page, if you click run, nothing happens because right now we're still at the root of our folder, which defaults to index.html. If you want to see music.html, you can type here to access the web page directly. However, that's not a very intuitive way for people to visit your page. So what we're going to add is on the home page, we'll add a button, or rather a link you can click on to navigate to the new page. And the link element is simply called A. Okay, so just like an image, you can put a destination for the link, but instead of source, this is called href, which is hypertext reference. And in here, you can put many things. You can put an external website such as Google or YouTube, or you can put down the file name of the page you want to navigate to. In our case, it's music.html. Now, unlike a picture, the link need to have something that you can click on. So in our case, it can be text. It can be anything that goes between the starting tag and the ending tag. It will be shown and it will be clickable for you to navigate. In our case, we'll simply have some text. We'll call it music page. Now, once I click run, you can see there is now a link. And of course, it doesn't get its own line because there's no line break between them. It's no paragraph. And if I click it, it goes to the music page. And if I want it to go somewhere else, for example, an external website, I just have to put the URL of the website here. Let's say this goes to google.com. Click on run, and I'm no longer looking at the music because I'm looking at the home page. I will click on this, but you'll see nothing's happening. This is because Google doesn't typically allow others to render their page in a different page. But if we were to open this page as if we're looking at it, and now if we click on this, it goes to Google. Lastly, there are times when you want to include content from other web pages onto your own page. YouTube is a great example. Sometimes you want to have a video inside your web page without having the user go navigate to YouTube themselves and come back. A lot of websites such as YouTube provide an easy way for you to do that. Let's have YouTube as an example. If I go to YouTube, I can click on share, and the first option, embed, which is a very common word people use for this, this will generate some HTML for you. If you copy this whole thing and you put it into your HTML, you click run, and now the video is inside your website that is entirely playable. So what this means, what this does is embedding, which is what this word is. It's embedding a content from another website into your own. A lot of websites support this, so check their own documentation to see how to embed their content into your website. Now, let's clean up a little bit and talk about the last element that will be used in a beginner's guide, which is div. If you have ever seen source code for any website, you'll find this element everywhere. It is used very commonly. However, by itself, it does not really do anything. In fact, if I were to insert a div, or if I were to surround some elements with a div element, as in I create a new one and I'm going to take the website title, put it into a div, pay attention to the page. When I hit refresh, nothing seems to have happened. That is because by themselves, div does nothing special. It will divide up text such as this, my text 1, my text 2. If I put it into a div, it will put it on a different line, but they don't have any special attribute aside from that. They're mostly used for you to organize your code and for you to be able to modify it using CSS. Now, for the second part of our video, we'll start talking about CSS. Inside your header, there is a line right here which references CSS. In particular, it references a CSS file called style.css, which you will see here. It has some default pages which you can remove, and we will. Now, what CSS does is it is an additional part of a website, and it's used to modify how it looks. The way we do that is using these things called CSS selectors. And within the CSS class file, you'll have a bunch of selectors that choose particular parts of your website, or rather, it will pick certain elements of the website to modify. And then in the content of the CSS, we'll tell it how to modify it. For example, the most direct way of CSS to work is you can modify all elements of a certain type. Type referring to h1, h2, div, image, body, or HTML. Let's say we want to make the color of our title text, my website, something else. So, because if we look at my website, it's an h1, all we have to write for the selector is h1. This selector targets any element that is an h1 element. In order to modify it, we follow it by a pair of curly brackets. Now, between these curly brackets, we need to put down pairs of attributes to modify them, finished off with a semicolon. Here's an example. If I want to change the color, I simply type color, column, and I want to change it to red. And I finish my sentence with a semicolon. Now, when I click run, you see the text color of my website has become red. If you want to change the background color, you just type background color. Let's say I change it to gray and finish with a semicolon. I click run, and now this has a gray background. There are a lot of, it's background color. Oops. Yeah, works the same. There's a lot of these values, and you can go very deep into these, but we'll talk about some of the commonly used ones here. Great, so now you're able to modify all elements of a type. But what if there are multiple elements and you only want to modify certain ones? For example, we have two divs here. Actually, we have three. We have an empty one, we have a div containing our title for the website, and we have a div for my text one. If I want to modify only one of them, we need to make them distinguishable. We'll call it class. This is another attribute you can add onto any element on your page. And this class can be anything, any text you desire, with the only exception that it cannot include spaces. Let's call it text-1. Now, because this div element is different from others, by having a class name, we can target it directly using a CSS selector. If you want to target the class of an element, you put a dot in front of it, followed by the class name. So in our case, that would be text1. And let's say what we want to change is change the color to blue. Finish with a semicolon. Now, when I click run, you can see nothing else has changed except for the fact that this text has turned blue. If I were to surround the my text2 also with a div, and I click run, again, nothing happens, because even though this is a div, what we're modifying is not divs, but anything with the dot text-1 class. So if I want to change that, we also need to give that class to the second text. And if I click run, both of these texts are blue because they both have the same class, being text-1, which is modified in our CSS file to have a blue text color. Another fun thing you can do with CSS is add a border to your elements, and it's simply border. And after that, you can have multiple values that change how the border looks. It comes, if you mouse over it, it actually sort of tells you the format of it, which is width, style, and color. Width refers to number of pixels. So let's say it's 2 pixels wide. Style refers to solid, dotted, or nothing. So let's say it's solid. And we can also give the border a custom color. Let's say it's a red border. So when I click run now, you'll see it have a red solid border going all the way around the elements. The middle one is a little bit thicker because it has the bottom border of the top text and the top border of the bottom text. Another important thing when it comes to CSS is spacing. Sometimes you may not want your text to be squished together with no space between like this. This is where you can use margin and border. Margin refers to the space you want to have outside of your element. And you can do 5 pixels or any number of pixels to add margin to every side. If you want to add margin to just one side, you can do margin top to add it to top, left, right, and bottom to whichever direction you wish to modify. Let's say in this case, I want to add margin of 5 pixels on all sides to the text-1 element. If I click that, now you can see there's a little bit of space between these. This is actually exactly 10 pixels because my text1 is asking for 5 pixels of space below it, and my text2 is asking for 5 pixels of space above it. Alternatively, if you want to have space between the border and the text themselves, you use padding to say between the border and its content have some space. It works exactly like margin, as in you can have padding with a certain number of pixels to apply padding to all sides, or you can do padding top, left, right, bottom to add padding specifically to that side. Let's say we do padding 5 pixels. Remember how this looks before I click run. Now you can see there's a little bit of space surrounding your text, and that's the padding added by the parent container. The last fun little trick we'll use is one that's just for fun. So if you pay attention, you'll see that every single element on our page is a perfect rectangle with very sharp edges. This is cool for a sleek, clean look, but if you want it to be a little more rounded without having to add your own image or anything like that, you can use a thing called border radius. And in here, you put in number of pixels, how much you want the border radius to be. If I put in 5 pixels, you can see the edge of these is slightly rounded with the border changing to a dot. The bigger the number here, the bigger the radius of your border is. If you have a perfectly square element and you change the border radius to match the radius, it will actually become a perfect circle. Lastly, these elements are flexible. If I have more text in here, it will grow in height. If I have less text, it will shrink. And if I have nothing inside it at all, as you can see with this div, even if I were to add the class here, it will have no content. So the only thing that stops it from having that gives it any size is the padding. However, you can customize the width and height of any element in the CSS by using width and height. And you give this in pixels. So I want to say width is 200 pixels and the height is going to always be 50 pixels, regardless of the content. So now if I click run, you can see all of these boxes looks identical, even though this one is empty and these two have text, because now instead of being flexible and taking up the whole width and just a little bit of height, it's now taking up exactly 200 pixels of width and 50 pixels of height. Great. you have gone through the first step of making your personal website. This should be everything you need to know to complete your assignment. If you want to know more, feel free to look online for any HTML related resources. There has been a lot of documentation, and it's always nice to explore on your own, learning about what you want to learn about.